Hi, I'm Christi and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm here to announce the Historical Fiction Readathon. Alright, so I'm so very excited to talk about the Historical Fiction Readathon today and kind of announce it, give you the prompts, tell you when it is, give you some recs, all of those things. So Tori and I from Novel Life, we started a historical fiction, or mostly historical fiction book club a couple months ago now. So we started it, I think, in July? Yes, because September is going to be our third pick for it. And so we basically pick a book, we read it that month, and then we have a live show on YouTube on one of our channels, and then where we just kind of discuss the book, our thoughts, talk about it with people in the comments who have read it as well. Just kind of all of those things. And so our book club for that is Leave It to the Pros, so you can definitely join and follow along. We have an Instagram that is just for it as well, which is Leave It to the Pros Book Club. Like I said, on Instagram, the links are in the description of the video as well. We'll kind of post some of the readathon announcements there too. So yeah, definitely follow us along there because that's a way to stay up with all of our book picks after the readathon as well if you want to stay and join us. So recently after our last live show, Tori and I were chatting and we were just like so excited and into historical fiction books, talking about all the books on our TBR that we wanted to get to. And so she kind of threw out the idea and was like, what if we had a readathon for it? And I was like, oh my God, yes, totally in. Let's do this. So I'm so very excited because there are so many that I want to read. So we're going to have a week-long readathon in September where you can basically read any historical fiction that you want. We do have some prompts just to kind of keep it fun, or if you want to engage and post on Instagram or anything like that. So let's get into it. All right, so the historical fiction readathon is going to be held between September 16th and September 22nd. So a whole kind of week long to read historical fiction books. We have put together a couple prompts as well so that you can join in, have kind of like a TBR you can set up, or if you want to just read whatever you want and see if they fit the prompts, totally can do that too, or just like share your thoughts of the ones that you do read on Instagram and tag us. We are going to have just like so much fun and we can't wait. So I'm going to quickly go through the 8 prompts and then I have some recommendations as well as what my TBR is going to look like and all of those things after the fact. So we are going to be having 2 reading sprints as well during this week-long readathon. So the first one is going to be on September 16th on Tori's channel. That's going to be at 8 p.m. EST. I'll post the graphic here. Again, all of this info is going to be on Instagram as well. And then on September 19th, we'll have another reading sprint on my channel here. And again, at 8 p.m. EST. So definitely join us for those. We will have a group book pick as well, which is what we will chat about in the kind of end of the readathon live show. So we're going to have a live show on Sunday, September 22nd to kind of end the whole readathon, talk about all the books you loved, kind of give each other recs, talk about how your reading went, talk about the group pick. So that's going to be on September 22nd at 6 p.m. EST on Tori's channel. All right, so 2 reading sprints throughout the week to kind of read historical fiction books and chat about what we're reading and all of those things together, as well as a live show at the end of the readathon where we kind of talk about all of our thoughts on all the books we've read throughout the week, as well as talk about the group pick. So I'm so excited. So those are all of the live show info. Like I said, all of that info will be posted on Instagram as well. So now we're going to get into the prompts. All right, so we have 8 prompts, and the first one is to read the group book. So like I said, this one we're going to have a live show at the end of the readathon to kind of chat about this book, as well as us hosts are reading it, and we hope that, you know, some of you read it as well so that we can all talk about it. So we're going to be reading The Rose Code by Kate Quinn. So Tori and I recently, we just read the recent release from Kate Quinn, which was The Briar Club. So we read that as our August book club pick for Leave It to the Pros, and we really enjoyed her writing. That was the first time either of us have read this author, and so this one's been recommended like countless times to us, and so we were like, we need to read another one of hers. So we thought this one would be a good one for the group book because we both want to read it, as well as I feel like her books have a lot of conversation that can be had, at least from the Briar Club. So yeah, the group book is going to be The Rose Code. All right, so the second prompt is to read a host's book rec. So we did give, I think, like 4 recommendations each that we have on our graphic here that I'll chat about, as well as I know Tori and I, we both did a collab kind of video together where we both gave historical fiction book recs back in, I want to say January. So I'm going to link in the description of the video my video that I did, as well as Tori's that she did on her channel, because we gave a ton more historical fiction book recs that we had read and loved. So if you want more of our recs, definitely go check out those if you want more than the 4 that I'm about to talk about on each of our like graphics. All right, so Tori's recommendations, she has these Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. She also has The Women by Kristen Hanna. I know this is one of both of our favorite books of the year, so we love it so, so much. So definitely read that one if you haven't. We also have The Flight Girls by Noelle Salazar. Haven't read that one yet. And then she also recommended The Last Train to Key West by Chanel Clayton. This author has been on my TBR for a while, so I'm kind of going to earmark that one for myself as well. So then the recommendations that I gave, so we have The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna. Honestly, any of hers, I love them so, so much. This one takes place in America during the Dust Bowl. We also have What the Wind Knows by Amy Harmon of obsessed with this one so much. This one is available on Kindle Unlimited with the read and listen feature. So you get the audiobook if you download it on Kindle Unlimited. It takes place in Ireland during the Irish Rebellion and kind of the early 1900s. Has some time travel. It is so beautiful and so good. We also have Girls of Flight City by Lorraine Heath, one of my favorites. Lorraine Heath is one of my historical romance queens, but like this book, her historical fiction, so good as well. I loved this one. This one takes place during World War II, but it's set in America. So it's set in a small town in Texas where American women were actually the ones training some British Royal Air Force pilots during the war. And so it is so good. I love this one. And then I also recommended The 10,000 Doors of January by Alex E. Harrow. This one's going to meet historical fiction as well as like fantasy. It has like some magical realism to it. I loved this one when I read it years ago. All right, so like I said, those are the book recs that us hosts recommend. Like I said, we have videos where we chat about even more historical fiction book recs, which I will link in the description of this video as well. And then I'm going to give you like some more recommendations as well right now. So first up, The Women by Kristen Hanna. I talked about it a little bit earlier and said that Tori and I both loved this book this year. This is one of both of our favorites of the year. So highly recommend. If you haven't read it, definitely pick it up. It takes place in the Vietnam War, kind of during and after. And it talks about women who served and kind of the trauma and the things that they went through, the PTSD, all of the after effects of coming back from the war and not getting both the recognition as well as the help and the support that they needed when they came back. And so it talks about that. It is so good, so emotional. Kristen Hanna books always hit just so well. I love how it's really easy to get into her historical fictions as well as just like feel all of the feels with hers. So yeah, highly recommend The Women. Also have Girls of Flight City by Lorraine Heath. Like I said, this takes place during World War II. It's set in a small town in Texas, and we follow the American women who are actually training secretly these British Royal Air Force pilots who are stationed there. And it does have a romance in it as well, which I just really loved. We follow the heroine and kind of we learn more about her family, her brother, her sister, and kind of all of those things. I really love this one and highly recommend people checking it out because I don't see it talked about as often as I feel like it should. So good. All right, and then What the Wind Knows by Amy Harmon. Like I said, this one is available on Kindle Unlimited with the read and listen feature. So definitely go grab those there. I think quite a few, if not all, of Amy Harmon's historical fictions are available through the read and listen feature on KU. So definitely go do that because I'm going to be talking about another one of hers here in a minute. This book is one of my favorite books of all time. I love it so much. It's just so beautiful and romantic. I just love the writing, very much like Soulmates vibes. Like I said, this one does have time travel as well, but it's handled so well. Basically in here, the heroine, she ends up slipping back in time, which you find out in the story how and why. And she goes back to Ireland in the early 1920s, I want to say. And like I said, they're kind of dealing with war and rebellion and kind of all of those things going on at the time. So it deals a lot with the history of that. It does have a romance. It is so beautiful and I love this book just so much. Then we have The 10,000 Doors of January by Alex E. Harrow. So I read this one years ago when it came out. I think this was the author's debut. I absolutely loved it. It was totally a cover buy because I think it's absolutely stunning, but then I read it and had such a good time with it. I loved it. So this is more YA and it deals with portal fantasy. So like it is historical fiction, but with fantasy elements as well. And it was just done so beautifully and so good. I loved it so much. So basically we follow the heroine and her name is January and we see her kind of slipping through portals and time and we kind of discover why as she reads these journals from her parents and it's just so good. I love this one so much. Like it's so hard to talk about it without giving things away. Highly recommend. Then we have The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna. Like I said, honestly, all of her books, I love them so much. All the historical fictions that I've read. This one takes place in America. So basically during the Dust Bowl, the Great Depression, it's the 1920s. We also, I think, follow into the 1930s as well. We stick with the heroine for quite some time and kind of see her story throughout the years and all of the trials and tribulations that she goes through. Her relationships with her family, her children is just done so well and so good. I loved this one so much. The story has stuck with me. It's so beautiful. I think I cried during the book as well as during the author's note at the end as well. I highly recommend her books on audio in particular. They're just so good. Highly recommend this one. All right, then we have Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So this author has quite a few historical fiction books you could read as well. This one is just my favorite from her. Basically, this takes place during the 1960s and it follows a fictitious band that's very much like rock and roll vibes and kind of the behind the scenes with the band and their drama and angst and fights and love and writing songs together. This one is another one that I highly recommend on audio. It won like a ton of audio awards as well and is just done so well. It has like a full cast narration and the story itself is told looking back through these journalists' interviews with the band and kind of figuring out why they fell apart, their highs, their lows, all of those things. So good. Just love this one. All right, and then we have The Giver of Stars. This one I remember reading it vividly because I stayed up until 4 a.m. reading this book in one sitting years ago. It was so good. I was so enthralled with the story. I loved it so much. This one, again, it takes place during the Great Depression in America. This one, I want to say it takes place in Kentucky. Yes, like small town Kentucky. We follow a bunch of different women's lives there and they all have kind of different storylines, which I was just obsessed with. It does have a romance in here as well, which was super sweet. And so we're following the process of this whole new traveling library that was put into place by Eleanor Roosevelt, which was one of the first ladies of the time. And so it's kind of going through that, like I said, following these character stories. Highly recommend. I love this one. All right, like I said, I had another Amy Harmon. So this is Where the Lost Wander. I love this one. I read it when it came out. It was so good. So basically this takes place in, I want to say 1850s in America, and it's basically like the Oregon Trail, or people traveling through that. So good. The author in here, she talks about at the end in the author's note, like some of her own family history with this story and characters. Just so good. Love this one. Like I said, it is available through Kindle Unlimited with the read and listen feature. So highly recommend, because you get the audio if you download the book on Kindle Unlimited. Love her book so much. Her writing is just so good. Very like poetic and beautiful and romantic and lush, and just I'm obsessed with her writing. So highly recommend this one as well. Like I said, I was going to recommend a bunch of Kristen Hanna. I think this is the last one though. So we also have The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. This one takes place in Alaska, which is where I live. And it actually takes place during the 1970s in Alaska. So very much like the living off the grid, wilderness type vibes. This one is very traumatic and definitely content warnings. So check that if you need it. Her books hit really hard. This one in particular, I remember I almost like DNF'd it and set it down because it was just too much of the feels and the vibes. And I was like, where's the story going? Is this like the right time for me to be reading this? Kind of things like that. So just know that going in. But the story is told so well, and I just really enjoyed this book. So yeah, this one, it takes place, like I said, in Alaska. Basically, we follow the heroine, follow her, and she's with her parents, and they decide to move up to Alaska. Her father was a Vietnam War prisoner of war, and so he decides to leave his life behind in California, I want to say, where they lived. They decide to move up to Alaska to kind of live off the grid, do what they want, live off the land, kind of like what a lot of homesteaders were doing at the time coming up to Alaska. And so it kind of follows their story. From there, a lot of like trauma and things going on as well, like I said. So definitely check content warnings for this one, but it is just such a good, I don't want to say good, it's hard to say like it's fun or it's good, but it's just such a beautiful story at the end. Through it all. Anyways, highly recommend Kristen Hanna's books in general. All right, so now we're going to get into some that are historical fiction, but like blended with other genres, because like a ton of books with historical fiction do that. So this is historical fiction. It also has like a little bit of mystery, thriller, horror. All right, so this is The Hacienda. I absolutely love this author's covers. They are so good. I'm obsessed with them and just love her books. But this one is my favorite from her. So this is told as like Mexican Gothic meets Rebecca, which I love both of those books. So if you love those as well, highly recommend checking this one out. I love books where a house is like a character of the story as well, and that's definitely the case here. This has like some horror, gothic-y, supernaturally type vibes and elements. It basically takes place in the aftermath of the Mexican War of Independence, and so kind of goes from there. Highly recommend if you want something that's historical fiction but kind of blends some other elements into it. Definitely check this one out. All right, if you want historical fiction mixed with some magical realism and some magic and fantasy kind of vibes, this is Magic Lessons by Alice Hoffman. This is a prequel to Practical Magic. It's one of the first prequels. So basically in the timeline of the story, this is the first, because this goes back to like 1600s kind of Salem witch trial times. I love the series so much, but the prequels are actually my favorites in the whole series. Like Practical Magic, the movie, so good. The book was just okay for me, but the prequels, so good. So this is the first one. Like I said, we follow back to the 1600s, kind of like Salem witch trial times. We're following the Owens family throughout history, and we kind of learn about the very beginning of their family and kind of things like that. I had such a good time with this one and loved it. So if you want kind of more magical elements to it, highly recommend. Again, if you want historical fiction mixed with fantasy, we have The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V. Schwab. This one is just so good. I ate this book up when I read it. Basically, this takes place in France in the 1700s, and it's kind of is it a death and maiden retelling, I want to say. Love this one so much. So in this one, the heroine, basically her life is kind of not doing so well, and so she ends up making a bargain with somebody who shows up, and it's basically where she can live forever, but she's not going to be remembered by anybody that she sees or meets. So it's basically as soon as she leaves a room, that person forgets everything about her, can't even remember her, doesn't even know they were talking to somebody. She's like erased from their minds and history. And so it kind of follows her story through many years. And so I just love this one. It was just told so well. Love it. So if you want more fantasy elements to your historical fiction, definitely check out this one. All right, these next two are going to be more historical fiction with fantasy, magical realism elements as well. All right, so we have The Kingdom of Bach by Marie Lu. So this one is so good. So basically this follows Mozart's sister, and it tells her story of like what could have been and all of those things. It has fantasy elements to it. The cover is just one of my favorite covers of all time. I love it so much. The blue is so striking, and all the like little hidden elements on the book as well. So yeah, it's just so good. I really love this one. The historical elements as well as the kind of fantasy of it all. So basically it says, to be remembered in this world, she created another. It is just so good. I highly recommend this one. It was like super unique to read. And again, another one I don't see talked about very much at all. All right, and then I have Gods of Jade and Shadow by Silvia Moreno Garcia. So this author is the author who wrote Mexican Gothic and things like that, but she has a big backlist, and this is one of them as well. This one, if you want, again, historical fiction with maybe more fantasy, magical realism, folklore kind of things inspired as well. So in here we follow the heroine. This is YA, or more YA, I would say, and it basically follows the heroine, and a Mayan god of death comes and visits her, and it kind of goes from there. So yeah, very much like kind of dark fairy tale elements as well as Mexican folklore. I really enjoyed this one. So again, if you want historical fiction with kind of more magic and things like that, definitely check out the ones I just recommended. So like I said, that was just a quick rundown of a bunch of recs from me. So let's get back to the prompts. All right, so the third prompt is to read a historical fiction set in the country that you live in. So this is going to be totally dependent on where you live in the world. I live in the United States, so the one that I'm going to read is going to be set in there. So the next one is to read a historical mystery. So like I said, historical fiction is one of those genres that you can really easily mix in other subgenres with it. So you can have historical fiction mystery, you can have historical fiction fantasy, paranormal, horror, kind of like all of the subgenres of fiction you can have kind of blended in with historical fiction as well. So yeah, this one is to read a historical mystery. I know the one that we recently read for our book club, The Briar Club by Kate Quinn, that kind of meets that because it has a very much like whodunit kind of mystery element to the story. So kind of like any historical fiction mystery that you can find will meet this prompt, which I will insert a photo here because like I just Googled historical fiction mystery and a whole like a Goodreads list came up. So definitely go check those out. I will talk about a couple that I have on my TBR at the end when I talk about the books on my TBR for this as well. Then the fifth prompt is to read a historical fiction set in a different country than you live in. So again, this is going to be dependent on the country that you live in, and then a book that takes place in a different country. So since I live in the United States, any other country will meet this prompt for me that I read a historical fiction book set in. The sixth prompt is to read a historical romance. So this is going to be super easy for myself at least because I love historical romances so much. So basically any historical romance that you can think of, you can read it for this prompt. If you need recommendations, I have a ton of videos on my channel talking about historical romance favorites. I have a recent one I did of like where to start if you're new to historical romance, all of those things. So I can't wait to see what people read for that one. Then prompt 7 is to read a historical fiction set in a new to you historical time period. So basically any other time period that you're interested in or that you haven't read a book set in before will meet this prompt. And then the 8th and final prompt is to read a historical fantasy. So like I said, a bunch of the ones that I just recently recommended meet that historical fiction with fantasy elements in there. So kind of like historical fiction fantasy, magical realism, any of those things that you kind of want to weave into the story will meet this prompt. Like we're not super sticklers, so if it meets it for you, check it off of your prompt list. Basically, again, for this one, I just Googled historical fiction fantasy. I'll put up the screenshot here that I'm looking at right now. And there's a ton out here. There's a bunch of newer ones, some popular ones. So like Divine Rivals, Ruthless Vows, Babel, Kingdom of the Wicked, Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater, The 10,000 Doors of January that I talked about, These Violent Delights, The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. We have What the River Knows. So there's a bunch on here. So you could basically meet it with any of those if they have like historical fiction with like a little bit of fantasy mixed in. All right, so those are the prompts that we have. Hopefully that all made sense. I will list all of the prompts in the description of the video as well. So if you need to go back and look at the prompts, any of those things to then build your TBR and things like that, definitely do that. And now we're going to talk about some of the books on my TBR for the week for this. All right, so first up, the group read I'm going to be reading. So this is The Rose Code by Kate Quinn. So this one's going to knock off a couple prompts right away. So it's the group read. It also takes place in a country other than the one I live in because it takes place in, I think, England. Yeah, England during World War II. So basically it says that it is another heart-stopping World War II story of 3 female code breakers and a spy they must root out after the war is over. So very excited to check that one out. I could also mark that down for historical fiction and mystery as well, because it sounds like it has like a mystery element to it too. All right, and then for the host rec one, I'm going to read one that Tori recommended. All right, so she recommended a couple I had read. She also recommended The Flight Girls by Noelle Salazar and also The Last Train to Key West by Chanel Cleeton. I'm kind of more interested in the Chanel Cleeton right now because I haven't read that author before, and I know she's like a huge or has a huge backlist of historical fictions. So this one, let's see, it's the 3rd in the series. So I think I'm going to actually read the first book because I think this whole series follows the same family, sisters possibly. So the first in the series is Next Year in Havana. Again, this is by Chanel Cleeton. Okay, good. Tori did read this one as well and she gave it 5 stars. So I'm going to use that as the one that a host recommended for me. And then I have a historical fantasy. So I have Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. This one is historical fiction with fantasy and magical elements. I know that one of my book besties, Samantha from Books with Samantha, read this one recently and recommended it to me. So I definitely want to get to it. It's kind of been on my TBR anyways. So that will be the perfect one to read for for historical fantasy. And then let's see, for historical romance, I have a ton of historical romances on my TBR. For this one though, I might pick up Mortal Follies by Alexis Hall. It's been on my TBR since it came out and I'm very excited to get to it. I know this one blends kind of historical romance and also fantasy. I know it's a sapphic romance. I am very excited to get to it. I think the cover is stunning. So I'll probably do that one for historical romance. But again, I have a ton of historical romances on my TBR, so I could read kind of any really and meet this prompt. All right, and then we're gonna go through some that I grabbed. So I have The Rose Arbor by Reese Bowen. This is a newer release that just came out, and this one is available on Kindle Unlimited, but it also has an audiobook through, I think it's an Audible exclusive, but it is on Kindle Unlimited. I know this one just came out recently and it meets the historical fiction mystery. So let me see what it's about. Okay, yes, an investigation into a girl's disappearance uncovers a mystery dating back to World War II in a haunting novel of suspense by the best-selling author of So it takes place in 1968, and it says that Liz is languishing as an obituary writer at a London newspaper when a young girl's disappearance captivates the city. If Liz can break the story, it's her way into the newsroom. Okay, so it says she has her best friend on the case as well, who's a police officer assigned to the case. She follows her, and they make another disturbing discovery that over 2 decades earlier, 3 girls disappeared while evacuating from London during the war. So one was found in the woods, the other 2 were never seen again. She's digging deeper after all these years. What could possibly link the missing girls to this abandoned village? So kind of goes from there. It sounds really, really good. So I want to read this one. I think it just came out in August 6th. So I'm excited to check this one out because it's a new release. The cover just like really pulls me in. I don't know why. So I'm excited to give this one a go. And then another one that I grabbed as well, because like I said, I was just looking up historical fiction mysteries to see what I could find. There's also The Last Secret of Lily Adams. This one is available on Kindle Limited with the read and listen feature. So I definitely grabbed that because like I said, you can grab the Kindle ebook on your Kindle library and then it will grab the audiobook for you as well to listen to. So I'm very excited to do that because I love an audiobook and that will help me get through so many. So let's see what this one is about. So this one just came out in June of 2024, and it says the death of a legendary actress reveals a wealth of Hollywood secrets in a breathtaking novel about betrayal, rivalry, and the punishing brutality of fame. So she's one of the brightest stars of Hollywood's golden age, and then some things happen. Her granddaughter, now 70 years later, is trying to struggle to understand a woman she loved but never really knew. She's looking through the memorabilia of her once glamorous career. She finds a letter. Okay, and then it says that the granddaughter finds an admission of a secret life in a story that begins and ends with some other superstar of the time of the silver screen, a bombshell who was actually brutally murdered. So she's unearthing her grandmother's connection to the notorious unsolved slaying, and then her life actually collides with the granddaughter's in the most shocking ways, and it kind of goes from there. So sounds good and like mystery elements. I'm here for it. All right, and I know this is only for a week, but I have a couple more that I grabbed from Libby recently as well. So the audiobooks. So I also have The Berry Pickers by Amanda Peters. This one sounds very interesting. Like I've seen this one all over the place and I feel like it's super popular or made like some awards last year, possibly. Let me look it up. It won a ton of awards in 2023. It just came out in October of 2023 as well. And this one, I think it takes place in the US and also in Canada. So we'll see. It takes place in Maine and Nova Scotia in the 1960s. So it says that a 4-year-old Indigenous girl goes missing from the blueberry fields of Maine, sparking a tragic mystery that haunts the survivors, unravels the community, and remains unsolved for nearly 50 years. So it says that her family came from Nova Scotia. They arrive in Maine to pick blueberries for the summer, which I guess was a thing that was done then. And then she ends up going missing, and it haunts her family in the town for years to come. So this one sounds really, really good. Like I said, I've seen the cover and people talk about this one a ton, so I definitely want to check it out. Another one that I have currently checked out from the library, which this one I know has gotten a ton of hype and praise, and I know a ton of friends who loved it as well, is Homegoing. So this one, let's see, I believe it takes place in Ghana and possibly the US as well, and I'm very intrigued by this one. I've heard amazing things about this author in general. I know that this book, as well as their next book, was that like Transcendent Kingdom, I believe. I know I've heard great things, and so I really want to get to it. So I'm going to start with Homegoing first. All right, so I think that is everything I have for the historical fiction readathon. Like I said, Tori and I are so excited to be hosting this and doing this. We can't wait to read all the historical fiction. I can't wait to see what you end up reading as well. I'll probably end up vlogging the week readathon as well, just to talk about all the books that I read. Hopefully I get through a ton. Like I said, I have a bunch of these on audio, so I'm very, very excited. Hopefully you can join us. Definitely let me know in the comments if you're going to join us. If you have any historical fiction book recs for me, let me know that as well in the comments. I would love to know. So yeah, if you'd rather leave me an emoji in the comments instead today, let me know that you watched this video. Maybe leave me like the girl emoji with like the mystery or like the Sherlock Holmes type of vibe because she's solving crimes. I'd definitely do that since I'm going to pick up a bunch of these historical fiction mysteries and kind of solve all the crimes. So yeah, definitely do that. If you haven't done so yet, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my future videos, and I will see you in my next one.